Hello, in this video we're going to go through some of the weapons and tactics of the First World War. Now, the First World War is seen as a change in the modern era, and it's seen the first industrial kind of warfare, and some of the weapons we're going to look at will go through that. By November of 1914, both sides had lost millions of soldiers, and therefore it was seen as the only option to dig in and create what are called trenches, with no man's land in between these two areas. One of the main reasons for this trench warfare was the invention of the machine gun, a gun which could fire up to 8 bullets a second and create a devastating effect on those soldiers trying to cross no man's land, particularly seen at battles like the Battle of the Somme, where over 57,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded in the first day. Despite the devastating impact of the machine gun, the biggest killer in World War I was artillery. It is known as a war of artillery. Artillery would be used to fire at the trenches as well as no man's land. And by 1918, artillery had become extremely accurate, and they could use tactics such as the creeping barrage, where the artillery would land just in front of the advancing enemy as they crossed no man's land to protect them. The first gas attack of the war came in April 1915, and both chlorine and mustard gas were used throughout the war and had a huge psychological as well as physical effect on soldiers. Scientists were able to develop new gas masks to protect soldiers, and only 3,000 British soldiers were killed by gas in the First World War. However, the psychological impact and the fear that this created left scars on many. Tanks were a completely new invention in World War I and were first used at the Battle of Somme in 1916. Initially, these tanks were seen as very slow, could break down easily and often got stuck in the mud. However, later in the war they were used to protect infantry as they crossed no man's land, with particular effect in 1917 at the Battle of Cambrai. Early in the war, planes were simply used as reconnaissance to take pictures of the other side, but by 1915 these planes had been fitted with machine guns and were often involved in dogfights in the air. Planes became particularly important in the 100-day advance of 1918, and to show the extent to which it increased, the Royal Naval Air Service and the Royal Flying Corps had gone from 37 airplanes at the start of the war to 23,000 at the end. Other key tactics to mention are the war of attrition, and this involved, for example, the Germans at the Battle of Verdun wanting to kill as many French as they could in order to try and force them out of the war. As well as this, other armies used tactics such as the bite and hold, where they would grab key areas of land before another group of soldiers coming behind and taking over. And finally, soldiers would dig underneath trenches, planting mines under the other lines and setting them off. Thank you for listening to this video about the weapons and tactics of the First World War.